Imagine waking before sunrise in a world with no written warnings, no weather forecasts, and no locked front door. The fire is low, the forest beyond it is black. Then a warning forms inside your mind and tells you not to move. No one beside you spoke. So what did ancient humans think the voice in their head was? To answer that, we have to separate three experiences that can feel almost identical from the inside: ordinary inner speech, a vivid voice understood as another being, and a controversial theory claiming ancient minds once worked in a completely different way. Ancient humans almost certainly had rich inner lives, and many probably experienced some form of inner speech, but they may not have divided thoughts, memories, dreams, and unseen voices into the same categories we do. The experience could be familiar while the explanation was completely different. Same signal, different label. And that distinction matters because archaeology preserves bones, tools, ash, and art. It does not preserve the sound of a thought. A stone blade can tell us that somebody planned several steps ahead. It cannot tell us whether that plan appeared as words, pictures, feelings, or a silent sense of what came next. Archaeology records what hands did, not what minds sounded like. We should begin with an inconvenient modern fact. Even people alive today do not all think in the same way. Some people report a nearly constant internal narrator. Others think more through images, bodily feelings, abstract relationships, or words that never become complete sentences. Research that samples people during ordinary life finds inner speaking in only a portion of moments on average, with enormous variation from one person to another. Apparently, even the brain cannot agree on whether it needs a full-time podcast. So there was probably never one ancient answer. A hunter tracking an animal, a mother soothing a child, a ritual specialist entering a trance, and a grieving person dreaming of someone who died could have experienced very different things. Calling all of it the voice in their head may already be forcing a modern box onto the past. Still, there is a strong reason to think ancient people could rehearse, reflect, and communicate with themselves internally. They behaved like minds capable of complex planning. Long before cities or writing, humans selected materials, shaped composite tools, carried useful objects across landscapes, organized hunts, prepared pigments, decorated bodies, and made deliberate marks. Engraved patterns from southern Africa reach back roughly 100,000 years. Whatever those marks meant, their makers were not creatures trapped in a permanent present. A complicated tool was a future plan made physical, the Stone Age version of a to-do list. They could hold an absent goal in mind and act toward it. They could remember what worked last season. They could imagine a finished object before it existed. None of that proves a running verbal monologue, but it makes the idea of ancient humans as mentally blank until a god issued instructions extremely hard to defend. But planning alone cannot tell us what that plan felt like. To get closer, we have to ask where inner speech comes from. Inner speech also seems to be built from social speech. Children often talk out loud while solving a problem. The speech is not really for an audience. It helps guide attention and action. You can hear the process when a child becomes their own tiny coach. As they develop, much of that private speech becomes quieter and more compressed until it can happen internally. The voice inside a mind is, in part, conversation folded inward. That gives us an important clue. An ancient person's inner speech would not have sounded culturally neutral. It would have been shaped by the voices around them. Parents, elders, rivals, storytellers, ritual leaders, and the remembered dead. The words available to describe an experience also help determine how it is noticed and organized. Your inner voice carries traces of your social world. It is less a lone hermit and more a committee that forgot to leave after the meeting. Now we reach the famous explosive theory. In 1976, psychologist Julian Jaynes proposed that people in early civilizations lacked modern introspective consciousness. He argued that until around the end of the Bronze Age, verbal commands generated by one part of the brain were experienced by another part as external voices, often the voices of gods, rulers, or ancestors. He called this the bicameral mind. In that model, a difficult decision did not produce the familiar feeling of, "I am thinking this through." Guidance arrived with the authority of someone else. Ancient stories in which gods direct human action were treated not merely as religion or literary convention, but as clues to a different mental architecture. A divine command was essentially the Bronze Age version of a push notification, except dismissing it might anger the sky. It is a brilliant story. It also goes far beyond the evidence. The first problem is that ancient literature is not a brain scan. A poem may describe a god sending courage, panic, wisdom, or disaster because that is how the culture explained events, because it serves the story, or because inner and outer causes were not separated in the modern way. A character moved by a deity does not prove the author literally heard an audible command. If future archaeologists treated every modern phrase as clinical evidence, "my phone hates me" would create a very confusing picture of our civilization. The second problem is timing. Humans were planning, symbolizing, teaching, migrating, cooperating, and adapting tens of thousands of years before the Bronze Age. A sudden global transformation in consciousness only a few thousand years ago would need stronger evidence than changes in surviving texts. Writing appeared at different times in different places, and what survives is a tiny, biased sample produced for particular social purposes. The mind did not wait for scribes to begin keeping minutes.
The third problem is that hearing a voice and having inner speech are not the same event. Most people recognize ordinary inner speech as self-generated, even when it has a distinct tone or personality. Hearing a voice can feel like another agent speaking, and it occurs in many conditions and also, at times, in people without a psychiatric diagnosis. Dreams, grief, exhaustion, isolation, ritual, and intense expectation can all produce experiences that feel more vivid or less clearly their own than everyday thought. Modern research also shows that culture affects how unusual inner experiences are interpreted. A voice may be understood as an illness, a spirit, a relative, a divine presence, or something else depending on the community and the person. Culture does not simply invent the experience, it supplies the map used to navigate it. That may be our best route into the ancient world. An ancient human could possess ordinary inner speech and still interpret certain thoughts as contact with an outside intelligence. A sudden solution, a remembered warning in an elder's voice, a dream of the dead, or a powerful impression during ritual might not be filed under "my brain generated this." The modern filing cabinet did not exist. This is especially plausible in societies where identity was built more openly around relationships. A person belonged to a lineage, a place, a living group, and a world populated by ancestors, animals, forces, and gods. In many such societies, knowledge was carried through performance and memory rather than stored in books. Repeating the voice of an elder internally may have felt less like private property and more like continued participation in a relationship. The question, "was that thought mine?" only works if mine is already a clearly defended border. Even now, that border leaks. You can hear a parent's warning years after leaving home. You can rehearse an argument using another person's tone. You can predict what a friend would say, then answer them, all without moving your lips. The mind runs a small feeder company and somehow casts people who never auditioned. For an ancient person, those internal presences may have carried greater authority because the culture around them treated ancestors, dreams, omens, and divine action as real causes in the world. That does not mean people were gullible or incapable of distinguishing a sound outside the body from a thought within it. Survival demanded attention to the external world, but the meaning assigned to an inner event could be radically different without the senses themselves being radically different. So what did the first humans with language think the inner voice was? We cannot recover a single answer, and anyone offering one is claiming more certainty than the evidence allows. But we can build an answer in layers. Think of it as a 5-layer map, not one switch that suddenly turned consciousness on. First, ancient humans almost certainly thought and planned internally long before writing. Second, that thinking did not have to be a continuous stream of words. Third, language and social life likely shaped whatever inner speech they experienced. Fourth, some unusually vivid thoughts, dreams, memories, and voices may have been understood as ancestors, spirits, gods, or other agents. And fifth, the claim that whole civilizations literally lacked introspective consciousness remains a provocative hypothesis, not an established fact. Now we can go deeper. Language adds another layer. Inner speech is often compressed. A complete internal sentence can collapse into a fragment, a rhythm, or a felt meaning. You may know what you intend to say before the words fully arrive. Ancient languages provided their own metaphors for breath, heart, spirit, memory, and agency. When a culture located thought in the heart or described inspiration as breath entering the body, it was not necessarily failing anatomy class. It was using the available model to organize invisible experience.
Our own model is not as final as it feels. We casually say the brain sends a message, attention selects a target, and memory stores a scene. Those are useful models, not literal machinery discovered inside the skull. Ancient explanations could also be functional without matching modern neuroscience. A thought understood as an ancestor's warning might reinforce a valuable rule, settle a dangerous hesitation, or bind a community to shared memory. The deepest change through history may not have been the sudden appearance of an inner voice. It may have been a change in ownership, less like installing consciousness and more like changing the name on an account.
Over time, different cultures developed new ways to describe a private self, examine motives, record reflections, debate responsibility, and distinguish revelation from imagination. The contents of the mind became more explicitly labeled as events produced inside one individual. But even that story is not a simple march from superstition to truth. Many people today understand some inner experiences through religious or spiritual frameworks. Others use psychological or neurological language. Some use both. The categories overlap because the raw events, memory, intuition, inner speech, dreams, grief, and sudden insight, do not arrive with scientific labels attached.
The ancient person beside the dying fire may have heard nothing like a spoken sentence. Perhaps the warning was a knot in the stomach, an image of danger, or the remembered authority of someone no longer alive. Perhaps it felt self-made. Perhaps it felt received. The honest answer is that we cannot listen across 4,000 years.
What we can recognize is the structure of the moment, a human being alone with an invisible experience, trying to decide what it means and whether to trust it. We still do that every day. We have brain scans, therapy language, notification settings, and far too many actual podcasts, but the central uncertainty remains. When a thought appears, what makes it feel like yours? Ancient humans probably did not wait for the voice in the head to be invented. They inherited brains capable of memory, prediction, language, and imagination, then used culture to explain what those abilities felt like from the inside. The real mystery is not when the mind began speaking. It is when humans learned to point toward that private, crowded space and say, "This voice is me."